Before we start this video, a large thank you to Kaylin, John, Ava, Devin, Flexi, Chris, Mohammed, Jan, Helistella, Joshua, and Paul for their support on Patreon. I genuinely hope you guys enjoy the video. And a special thank you to Mike Harden Games for their immense support this month on Patreon. Hello guys, and today we're going to start our damage system by adding first damageable limbs to our zombies. So for example, if I shoot him in the arm here, or the torso, or the head, depending on where I shoot him, I want him to play a specific animation, if any at all. And we can do some other things like deduct some health from that limb. So if you want your arm to fall off after a specific amount of health has been deducted, we can do that. So we're going to start by putting colliders on each of the limbs for our system. So I'm going to start with the spine 01 on my model. And I'm going to add a capsule collider here. And I'm going to make the radius just about the same width as my torso. You might need to change the direction because, as you can see, mine's kind of pointing out here from the chest when it should be going up and down. So I'm going to put mine on the x-axis here so it's facing the right way. And I mess with the radius a little bit. Make sure you make all these colliders set to triggers. Every single one of these capsule colliders we make should be a trigger. You want it just about the size of the torso. If you want to get real meticulous, you can add multiple colliders on spine 1, 2, and 3 and do it that way so you get an exact... not so much of a rounded guess. Then go to your layers here, and I'm going to start off by making damageable head, then I'm going to make damageable torso, then I'm going to make damageable right arm, damageable left arm, right leg, and left leg. And I'll explain why we're doing this. We're using a raycast to shoot our bullet, obviously, and when we do that, we can get information from what we hit, including the layer. So with the layer, then, we can decide which damage animation to play, and we can also pass along some other effects. For example, in the future, when we eventually put health on these individual limbs, we can subtract health from that limb as well as the total health of the zombie. Now make sure you change each of the layers that you're adding colliders to. For example, spine 01 will be a damageable torso to the actual proper layer, and only change that layer itself, not the children. So I'm going to go ahead now and just do the head and the rest of the limbs. You might want to add a couple layers, maybe even 3 if you'd like to get super precise, to things like the arms, because you have the shoulder, the elbow, and the hand, and you can extend those out a little bit. And then with the leg, you have the upper leg, the lower leg, and then the foot. So with the torso, too, you could have the lower torso and the upper torso because the body has a bit of a natural curve. You will see if you take a side view of the model, so you can separate that into 2 separate colliders, too, if you'd like. Since I'm doing this to illustrate a point and to teach you, I'm not going to get ultra precise with it, but I will make it so it definitely suits the sizes. My tip to you, too, would be to, make them a little bit more generous than they have to be. That makes for more fun gameplay. Unless you want to be super meticulous in particular, you can size them up to the actual size of the limbs. So beyond that, what we're going to do, and since you get the idea of what to do now as I'm doing in the video, I will talk while I do this. We're going to eventually, after this, go to where we created our shoot functionality. Okay, we're going to make it so our shooting only happens on a few layers, that being all the damageable layers and the environment. So if it hits the environment, the idea is maybe in the future we can add like a spark effect and put a bullet hole wherever it's shot into. And then if it hits one of the damageable layers, well, obviously we're going to process some damage on the zombie itself. So we would deduct some damage from the zombie's total HP if it is a shot that lands on the torso or the head. If it is a shot that lands on the arms or the legs, we will deduct no total HP, but we can deduct HP from that specific limb. And eventually, if that limb hits 0, we can make the limb fall off or detach, and we can do a lot of fun stuff with it in the future. But that is the plan for this video, basically, to lay out the foundation here for this damage system. We can also play specific damage animations depending on which limb you hit. So, for example, shooting a zombie in the head will make the head recoil. The torso will make the torso recoil. And in the future, too, we're going to make it so this is directional specific. And by that, I mean, if you're standing behind the zombie with a shotgun, and you shoot him in the back, he's obviously going to move forward, but it's like he's going to be pushed from behind. And if the reverse is true, and you are standing in front of the zombie and shoot him with a shotgun in the torso, he's going to be pushed back. We can also gauge the animation type depending on the weapon's damage in the future. So, for example, if you're using a shotgun versus a pistol, obviously the damage animation will be a lot more exaggerated with a shotgun. But these are all things that we will get to eventually, but you can see how this logic can quickly layer up and layer up and layer up and become very dense. But we're going to start with the very most simplistic things. We're going to make the limb system, and we're going to make them play a damage animation depending on which limb you shoot. We're not going to get into specific types of bullets right now or the direction just yet, but that is what's to come in the future. I just want to give some groundwork here for what to expect. Okay, now that that is all done, let's go over to our script here in the Weapon Animator Manager. And this is the script that's attached to your guns when you make them. So right here under shoot something, you can see we have this physics raycast statement here. And we can actually add 2 more variables here. One for a distance, that's how far the raycast will go. And one for a layer mask, which is what the raycast will shoot on, whatever layers it will try to detect. So let's actually make a couple headers here now. First, we can make a header to basically give the gun some range. We can move this later on where we have this variable on the weapon item script itself, but for now it's fine here because this is actually attached to the weapon. So let's give it a header. I'm just going to call this weapon bullet range. Going to make you can use serializable field if you want, just to follow the naming conventions though. I'm going to use public. I'm just a stickler for making everything look kind of similar, but serializable field is probably what most people would use and should use. I'm going to use public float. I'm going to say bullet range is equal to 100F or 100. This is just the default. I think 100 is fine for now. We can mess with that later on in balancing and such. But for testing purposes, 100 is a fine number. And then right below that, I'm going to make another header. I'm going to call this shootable layers. And as the title suggests, this is going to be a public layer mask. And I'm going to call it shootable layer, or layers, sorry, not a capital A. And whatever layer is on this is what the bullets will be able to detect. So if your layer is not included in this layer mask, you will not be able to detect what the raycast is shooting onto. So for example, if I add the head to this and the torso to this if statement will return true. So let's change this to hit collider GameObject.name. That's important because we want to know which collider we've hit. And GameObject.layer, I mean, not name. So this will actually go to the specific collider that it hits, because we just made a bunch of them, then get that game object, and then get that layer. So let's go into the game here now, and we can actually test this shortly. But as you can see now, we have all these set up on our proper layers. Oh, and one last thing, this is very important. Make sure you make all of those capsule colliders triggers. Very important. Make sure they are set to triggers, or else you're going to get some weird behavior. All of those damage colliders, once more, should be set to triggers. Now, I'm going to make damageable head, damageable torso, right arm, right leg, left leg, and the default layer. Default being the environment as shootable layers. One last time before I do this, again, as I just said, make sure all your damageable capsule colliders are set to triggers. We don't want them to actually be colliders. We only want them to detect gunshots. So now, if I go over here now and I aim at Mr. Zombie and I shoot him in the head, we can see we have 8. And if I shoot him in the chest, that's 9. So if I do it one more time, just to be clear, I'm going to shoot him here in the chest, that's 9, and in the head, that will be 8. That's cool. So now if I stop the game, and you can see here, if I go and click on the zombie, and I check my layers, 8 and 9 here, so I got 3 on 8 and 2 on 9. You can see 8 is the head, and 9 is the torso. So I shot him 3 times in the head and twice in the torso. Excellent. So that's working as intended. Now let's actually process some more logic after we do that. So let's go to a zombie here now. We already know that we can pass along where we're shooting him. Let's make further logic. So let's make another parameter here on the zombie's animator. And much like we have in the player, we have is performing action. We can take this and bring it across and use it for the same purpose. So you can just copy that and paste it over here. Now we could do this exactly the same as the player, but I'm actually going to show you a different way just because this is an educational series and I want to expand your knowledge as much as I can. Let's go on to the empty state here, or let's create an empty state rather for the zombie on the override layer, and let's create an override layer. So again, the override is to stop locomotion and is to play an action. So if you get shot or if you're grabbing somebody, it's basically everything but your locomotion that it requires a full bodied animation. It will stop your locomotion and it'll play this. So make sure you turn the weight up to 1 and make sure it is positioned after the base layer, or else it won't override the base layer. That's very important. So I'm going to add some animations here now. I just have damageable forward head, so you can see that that animation is for if you get shot in the face from somebody in front of you, and this one is forward torso. That's for if you get shot in the torso from somebody in front of you. We're in the process of making an animation pack, myself and Rob. I'm doing the controllers, doing the animations for this tutorial series. It will include a bunch of zombie animations, so be on the lookout for that too if you guys need some animations. Anyway, we're going to make these transition back to the empty state just like we did before with our character, and I'm just going to rename this to, in the future we'll be using damage types. This is a moderate amount of damage to the head, and this is definitely a heavy amount of damage to the torso. It looks like this will be like a shotgun hit. As you can see, it's very, very recoiled, very snappy. But we're not going to worry about that right now. So make a transition back from these animations to the empty state, like so. And now, we want to do some logic, because when we actually start playing these animations, we want to make sure that our zombie is set to is performing an action. So let's go to this empty state here, and let's make a reset animator bool zombie. So this one will be zombie specific. Now, we could do the same thing we do with our player, where we reset it, and then we copy the animator's parameter from the player on an update function, but there's another way you can do it too, which is what I'm going to show you. Both ways work just as fine. This one is, again, the same. I just like it better. So usually we'd say animator.setBool, and then we would set our isPerforming action bool to false after we're done playing the animation. We can still do that, and then we'd copy that on our zombie manager script because we're copying the parameter from the animator every frame on an update function. But we can actually cut out one step, and we can make this a little bit simpler. We can actually go to the zombie here in the parameters and delete this. We don't even need this. And then we can basically go to our zombie manager. We can make a header for flags, which is what we would have done anyway. And we'll make a bool for isPerforming action, which is what we would have done anyway. But instead of getting it from the animator every frame on the update method, we can just change it to false from the reset animator bool script here. It's very simple to do that. All we have to do is go here and we can make a variable of type zombie manager. And this is actually getting the information from the animator on the game object. And since the zombie manager script is on the same game object as the animator, we can say animator.getComponent zombie manager. And then we could say if zombie manager is not false, or does not equal null, we can say zombie manager.isPerforming action is equal to false, thus giving the exact same effect. And this makes it so you don't need to call this on the update method. Now, the only downside is you can't use this for transitions in the animator because there's no animator parameter. For example, if you had a transition from one animation to another that required a parameter, you wouldn't be able to do it that way. But if you don't use that for animator transitions, like those little arrows in the animator, then you can do it this way perfectly. So let's make a new script and call it Zombie Effects Manager or Zombie Effect Manager. And this is going to handle all of our zombies' effects like playing animations, spraying blood, etc., etc. I'm going to make a few functions, and they're going to go as follows. Public void damage head, or damage zombie head, public void damage zombie torso, damage zombie right arm, right leg, and left leg. Now, in Resident Evil 2, usually a shot to the head almost always ends with the zombie recoiling or staggering. A shot to the torso, it depends. With a weaker weapon, it might stagger a little bit, but they'll keep walking at you typically. With a shotgun, it will always stagger them if you're within close enough range. And a lot of times, shots to the legs or the arms don't do anything at all. They just damage the limb, but they don't actually stagger the zombie. So we can really get into that logic more in the future. But for now, let's set up the groundwork where we can actually individually damage each of these limbs and have an individual reaction. So I'm going to keep it very simple off the get-go. Let's start off by calling our zombie manager. And on awake, we can say zombie manager equals get component zombie manager. I'm just going to rename that zombie in a second too. Now we're using the zombie manager here because the zombie manager is where we're going to call everything. For example, it has the animator parameter down here, or variable down here, set to public. So in the future, all the scripts will be talking to other scripts through the zombie manager. If you make another script that wants to talk to the zombie effects manager, it will go through the zombie manager first and then grab the zombie effects manager variable from that, and so on and so on. So let's go to the zombie head, and we're going to say zombie.isPerforming action, sorry, I get my videos mixed up, is equal to true. So this will stagger the zombie, and I'll show you why that will stagger the zombie soon. It will stop him from moving. And just for the sake of the video, I'm just going to put a comment here to explain why. We always stagger for a headshot. And then down here, right below that, we want to obviously make the zombie play an animation. So we're going to say zombie.animator, zombie being the zombie manager, .play. And we want to open up some brackets, and we have space for the animation name, and then we want to crossfade that over 0.2 seconds so it doesn't just snap to an animation. It blends it nicely. Actually, I think we're supposed to use zombie animator.crossfade, not play. That's my mistake. Crossfade, yes. Let me play the animation name, which in my case, I'm just going to grab that real quick from the project because I do forget it. Let's minimize this here real quick. And I'm just going to say 0.2f, which means takes 0.2 seconds to blend it. Now, if I minimize this, let's go down here. Okay, yeah, so it's damageable or damage forward head 01. So I'll paste that in there, and like so. We can copy and paste this logic then in the other limbs. And if you have your own animations, that's perfect. If not, then I'm going to release a pack in the future with Rob. We're going to include all the animations we need. Until then, I'm going to keep this very simple. So that was a torso. There we go. Now back over on the weapon animator manager script. What we want to do now is we want to see which limb we're shooting. So we know that this is where we shoot the gun. Let's make a variable of type zombie effect manager, call it zombie. And then we can say equals hit dot collider dot game object dot get component in parent. And remember, because the limbs are always the children of the main game object, which holds all of the scripts and functionality. And if that is not null, we can then proceed with some logic. So we can say if zombie does not equal null, cool. Then we can say if hit.collider.gameObject.layer is equal to, and we match the layers with the logic. So I think layer 8, for example, is the head. So I'm just going to check that real quick, though. I'm going to minimize this. So we say if layer down here, yes, 8 is our damageable head. We can say if the zombie is not null, and if we shot layer 8, which is the head, then quite simply put, we can say zombie.damage head. And damage zombie head, and that's it. And we'll run the logic in there just like that. Very simple, very straightforward, very clean. And we'll do an else if statement, because if we're not shooting the head, well, okay, let's check and see if we shot the torso. Then let's check and see if I think the torso is 9. And then let's check and see if we shot the right arm, the left arm, the right leg, or the left leg. And just like that, keep on plugging in your values, your numbers here. So 10 is the right arm, 11 is the left arm, 12 is the right leg, and 13 is the left leg. So that is fine. We can just make a bunch of else if statements and proceed with the logic. Now, as I said before, this is a very simplified version. I'm just going to talk over this while I do it because, again, this is just matching numbers of function names. You guys have no problem doing this. We're going to actually add a lot more dense logic to this in the future. We'll make stagger a weapon power dependent thing, and with certain weapons, they will lose their power after a certain amount of range, such as the shotgun. And then we can also add different animations depending on the direction the zombie is shot from. We'll add different animations depending on the power of the weapon that's being shot, and so on and so forth. But right now, because this is a prototype and I don't have the animations complete yet, we will keep it very simple. And it's best to start off these things as simple as possible and slowly layer on the logic as you get the systems more finessed. So that looks like it should work fine. That's all good. I'll go back here now, and just for now, if you want to, you can even just copy and paste a placeholder animation. Because the important part is we're going to know if we're shooting the right limb. Now to make a few comments here for future things we want to add on. For example, stagger depending on weapon's power. That's something we want to add on as a future bit of functionality. So this will be my pseudocode here. I'm going to add play proper animation depending on where zombie is shot from. And I just talked about that. So I'll say, example, if the zombie is shot from behind, the head should move forward. And if the zombie is shot from the front, the head should move backwards or recoil back, whatever you want to say. We also want to add some blood effects to the point where the zombie was shot, the point of contact specifically. So you want to play maybe like a blood splatter, and you can get real creative with that too. You can make the blood splatter be dependent on how intense the gunshot was, but I'm probably just going to play one of so many random blood splats generated by where the contact point is of the bullet. So I'll put that there. And to those of you who watched the Soul series, you'll know that we actually did a video on instantiating blood at a contact point from when the sword strikes an enemy. So we'll do something similar like that with the raycast point of the bullet. Okay, so after all that is plugged in, we can save that now. Just going to look over this real quick. Looks good. Minimize that. I think we're ready to test it. So let's go into... let's go to the zombies state scripts. The attack state. Just open the attack, idle, and pursue target, because we're actually going to use the isPerforming action tool now to do a check. So for example, the auto state's fine because we can find a target no matter what we're doing. So this is okay. We can get rid of that. Now the pursue target state, if we're performing an action, like we're taking damage, we don't want to be able to run. So what we're going to do right at the start of the state, right away, we want to simply say, I'm just going to delete that pseudocode there. We're going to say if zombie manager dot is performing action, then we're going to return this state because we're not going to do anything. And actually, we're going to do a little bit more than that. We're going to make sure we set our animator values to 0 so we're not moving anymore. So open up some brackets under there. I'm just going to put a comment here. If the zombie is being hurt or is in some action, pause the state. This will just basically not run any logic on the state. And we're going to reset the movement to 0 because we don't want the zombie sliding across the floor or moving while it's being staggered. So we can copy this set float function here and set the 1 to a 0. That will change the vertical parameter to 0, which will stop the movement in turn. And then after we're done performing an action, which will happen at the end of the animation, we can return to the state's normal function. Do the exact same thing on the attack state. I'm just going to delete this debug message here or paste it over it. I'm actually going to get rid of it. the exact same thing is happening here. If we're in the middle of some kind of action, we just wait until we're done processing the action, and then we can process the rest of the state. Now, if I go into the game here and press play, you can see I will cut the corner right here now, and I'll take a look at this guy. And if I shoot him right in the head, he should play, yep, the head recoil. The torso equals the torso recoil action. The head again, the head, and there's the head again, and there's the torso. So that's really awesome, guys. That is the foundation for our limb-based damage system. If you did like the video, be sure to drop a like. It does genuinely help out my series so much. We can further expand upon this in the next couple of episodes, and we're going to soon get to zombie grapples and zombies damaging the player when the animations are complete. Like I said, we are working on an animation set for that, which will include zombie damages, zombie attacks, zombie deaths, movement, all that's good stuff. So if you guys are interested in looking for some animations, you'll see a video on this channel eventually. Alright guys, if you're feeling like a super champion, be sure to check out my Patreon below, and I will see you guys in the next episode.